Mm. It's working? Okay, so first I would like to thank Gregor and Thierry and Philippe for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to present my work. So in this work we analyze like the symmetry of a projective integral pair state which has feature of chiral topological order. This work was done at the institute, at the Max Planck Institute for Quantum Optics, so in Garching, next to Munich, and it was done in collaboration with Anna Ackenbrock, which is a PhD student in our group, and Norbert Schur, which is one of the boss in our group, right? So when we are dealing with strongly interacting coalesced systems, typically we have systems with many constituents and we make them interacting, and we are all of us somehow, one way or another, facing the exponential complexity of this problem. Which means that most of the methods we have, unless fine-tuned case where we have integrability, for example, all the methods we have are limited, either to small system sizes or we have to make some approximation. And in this zoo of methods, one of them ends up having tremendous success, which is the one of model states. And maybe it's the most trivial one. Typically, we have some system and we just say, okay, maybe the wave function is described by that. Okay, it's very simple. Somehow we are like building very simple wave function, but they capture the universal feature of a system. They allow us on one side to gain intuition on the nature of the system, and on the other side to make prediction. So I'm sure if I say model wave function, you all have in mind one of them, and for me, coming from the fractional quantum Hall community, it's of course the Laughlin state. Okay, so of course, like you all know the fractional quantum Hall effect. It's a measure of resistance on two-dimensional electron gases, and that's the experimental curves. And if you see that like this or for the first time, you're like, okay, what's going on? But then Laughlin comes, he just writes this. You say, well, here on this plateau, the electron should behave more or less like this. And the prediction is simple. The excitation should have fractional charge and fractional statistics. Okay, so somehow just the fact of writing down like the wave function gives you like a very strong, like statement about the nature of the excitations. But of course, like this, like writing, it seems like a very simple approach, but it's not that easy, right? We don't wake up every morning and write a wave function that is that successful, right? At least we would like to, but we don't. So somehow, some people came up with a systematic way of constructing model state, and of course, the typical example of that is matrix product state, which belongs to the zoo of tensor network state. So let's see how it works. So this is a state for on a lattice, or for one-dimensional lattice. I will introduce this three-ranked tensor, which is usually thought as a matrix. So you have one index corresponding to the physical site. So for example, imagine you have spin 1/2 degree of freedom. You have the S can take two values up and down. And for each of this value, you have a matrix. These are S, L, or R. Okay? And to construct the model state, what you just have to do is you put this matrix for each physical site, here 4. You plug in boundary condition, here given by these two vectors u and phi, and here is your model state, given by this product of matrices, and that's why it's called matrix product states. So there is, of course, one important quantity here, which is the dimension of this matrix, which I will call D, which is also referred to as bond dimension, and this is typically how complex will be the state. One thing that was realized very fast is that this representation is exact for many model states. So here I cite IKLT. I will take the example of Majorana-Ghosh a bit later. And this exact representation typically imposes only small bond dimension, typically D equal to 2. So it's very simple matrices.
But if D is 1,000, would you call it a model state?
Well, not really, but yeah. Well, it depends if there's a good reason why it's 1,000, right? But if it's 1,000 but it doesn't grow with the system size, then it's a model state. But of course, not that easy to analyze. Okay, and of course, if this was the only advantages of this way of writing state, it would not have been that successful. But of course, there are variational algorithms which are based on the fact that we can write state orders in this form. And these variational algorithms have polynomial complexity, namely the DMRG, TBD, IDMRG, all these algorithms, and just allows to use, like typically this algorithm allows now to understand the physics of almost any 1D system. Moreover, so this was a numerical aspect. Now, more analytical aspect. The fact of writing a state under this form allows for systematic study of the symmetries of this state, which give rise in the, at the beginning of the year 2010 at the classification of all 1D topological phases, just by looking actually at the representation of this object. So one question, of course, is in the regard, of course, of the classification, this kind of thing, is can they describe all phases? And of course, exactly the answer is not, and the counterexample is, of course, critical states, which, as all these states obey the area law, the critical states do not, and thus cannot be described by this kind of formalism. But this is, of course, just an exact statement. But now, if we ask whether we can approximate the state using this construction, well, even for infinite size, even critical state can be approximated in the, let's say, efficiently, in the sense that the bond dimension you have to take just grow moderately with the system size. So now, today I'm going to focus on another kind of model state, which are called projected entangled pair state, which are generalization of matrix pair state to dimension larger than 1, and that was introduced by Freyschrate and Chirac in 2004. In this construction, the matrices are just replaced by tensors. So once again, I'll take the simple example to introduce the notation. Square lattice spin 1/2. You introduce like a rank 5 tensor, one tensor for the physical degree of freedom, this S, four virtual degrees of freedom, which typically carry the entanglement from one side to the next neighboring side. And if you want to construct a model state, then you just have to contract this tensor for the different sides of your lattice. So once again, there are like many model states that have exact representation on this form, and I'm going to give the example of the nearest neighbor RVB in 2 seconds, and also like toric code, quantum double model, like many examples. Up to date now, there are competitive algorithms in dimension equal to D, notably by Philippe Corboz, using this model state, namely IPEPs, which are competitive with the other algorithm for strongly correlated state. And once again, we can raise the question, can they describe all the phase? Exactly, definitely not. Approximately, maybe not. And that's a bit the question of the talk. So let's take a simple example. And the example I want to take is the nearest neighbor RVB state. So I guess you are all familiar with this state. You have spin 1/2 on the square lattice. You just say, OK, each spin 1/2 is in a singlet state with one of its nearest neighbor. And you have this state, and then you say the nearest neighbor resonating valence bound state is the superposition of all the possible singlet covering of my lattice. So can we write a PEPS representation for that? Well, it's in fact very simple. It's given by just this simple tensor. We put, so on the physical, so on the virtual degree of freedom, I'm going to put a sum of representation. Like a spin 0 and a spin 1/2 representation, and the tensor elements are all of this form. I have to put 3 of the legs in the spin 0 representation and 1 of the leg in the spin 1/2, and I'm just going to project the physical spin on that virtual spin. And of course, after that, I just have to take all the rotation of this specific matrix like tensor elements. And so at the end, what we have is a tensor that have only 8 non-zero elements. Right? And so this is extremely cheap. I don't have to say what's my size of my lattice, what's anything. It's just 8 tensor elements, and what I have is the nearest neighbor RVB state. I don't have to say anything else. And of course, this is like nice, but for now, it's just a representation. Another question that we can answer is what can we read physics outside of this tensor? Can we just, looking at the tensor, try to guess some property? And for example, what is well known for the nearest neighbor RVB state is that there is something called the Gauss law. And this Gauss law is in fact very simple to see at the level of this tensor by what is called a virtual symmetry. And in this case, it's a U1 symmetry because it's a U1 Gauss law. So what is a virtual symmetry? Typically, it's just a property of invariance of our tensor. We act simultaneously on the 4 indices by some group elements, here these U1 matrices, okay? And this leaves the tensor invariant, okay? And it's called a virtual symmetry because it doesn't act on the physical leg. Here we have a charge, which is exponential I5, but nothing specifically interesting about this charge. Is there any question here? Okay, so one.
Not the Gauss law, so
Yes.
That's a property in that case.
Yes. What do you mean by that?
No, it's not something that you ask for every PEPs.
No. We'll see. Well, anyway, we'll see that I'm going to consider a PEPs which is like an extension of that, and in some case it will have some virtual U1 symmetry, and in the general case it's at a virtual Z2 symmetry. So yeah, it depends on the parameters. Yes.
Is that the case for the bipartite lattice?
Yeah. That's a very good question. I'll come to that later. It's part of the process. I mean, this is the case for whatever lattice. But the problem is now you have to come from what's the symmetry of the tensor or to what is the symmetry of the state. And that's somehow like kind of the topic of the talk, so I'm just not going to spoil it now. But yes, it's a good question. Okay, so one question you can ask is, well, you are defining your state with local object. Can it describe topological order, right? Topological order is something which is intrinsically global. And can like a small object like this describe topological order? And the answer is yes. And what's the basic ingredient for this to work is especially these virtual symmetries. So now I'm writing it in a bit more general way and a bit different from the previous thing. I'm acting on two of the legs with a group element UG and on the two other with the Hermitian conjugate UG dagger, and this is invariant. And this, if my tensor fulfills this property, what I can do is that I can create strings of this UG or UG dagger. And these strings, because of this property, I can just move them without any cost. They are like just free to move around my lattice, which means that somehow they are not localized anywhere. So imagine you act with your Hamiltonian, a local Hamiltonian at some place. Well, the string is not there, right? So it cannot be detected by this operator. Right? So somehow these strings are like the basic reason why PEPs can describe topological order. And for example, I can create the different topological sectors or different ground states inside my ground state manifold just by inserting these strings, for example, here on a cylinder. So I can insert this string, and then this one will not really be localized here. And another thing that I can do is project my boundary condition on a certain topological sector, and a topological sector here will just be somehow the eigenvalue of this string once I will wrap it around like a periodic direction, a periodic dimension. Is there any question? Okay, so in fact, like PEPs, even though you could have wondered, PEPs can describe topological order without any problem. And as I told you, they can very simply describe toric code, quantum double model, not a problem. It's very simple. However, there is one important class of systems that PEPs don't seem to be able to describe, which is chiral topological order. And I don't think that I have to give so much introduction to chiral topological order in this audience. So of course, it's the kind of topological order that is found in the fractional quantum Hall effect. It was also predicted to occur in the sort of chiral spin liquid, notably on the Kagome lattice by some people in the audience. And so the only thing that I need for this talk is just to say that at the edge of the system with chiral topological order, you have a chiral edge mode, so it's just a conduction mode. For example, if you have electron, where electrons can propagate only in one direction, and it's chiral and gapless, so it can be described by the chiral conformal field theory. And this specific chiral conformal field theory is characteristic for the topological order. So if you take fractional quantum Hall effect, here you will have a given CFT, and for example, here not, and here also you will have a given conformal field theory, and it's not going to be the same. So it's characteristic, the conformal field theory that you have at the edge. Now, what we do, of course, we usually don't like to compute stuff with an actual edge. So what we are going to do is use like a manifold without edge, but extract the conformal field theory using the entanglement spectrum, which is known since Lee and Haldane, to give a picture of this edge. So let me introduce a bit more things, and notably the entanglement spectrum. So I will, through the talk, consider a cylinder. So I will take this cylinder, which is periodic in that direction, and I consider just a partition of my system into subsystem A and A bar. And the entanglement spectrum is obtained just by tracing the A bar part. Now I have a reduced density matrix through A that I can write as a thermal state at temperature 1 of an Hermitian matrix H entanglement, and this is the spectrum of this Hermitian matrix is the entanglement spectrum. Okay, and what was shown in many papers in the literature in the last 10 years is that the spectrum of the entanglement spectrum is typically an image, is the same spectrum as the one of the H mode. So now let's take an example, and this example is the one of the Laughlin state. So I'm considering nu equal 1/2 Laughlin state, so the bosonic version, and the CFT at the edge is a Carroll CFT called SU2 level 1. Okay, it has two Carroll branches that you can see here. This, so it has two topological sectors. One called the event sector is constituted of all the integer spin, while the other one, the odd sector, is made of all the half integer spin. Both sectors have a linear dispersion relation, it's a CFT, and the velocity is exactly the same. Okay? So also what CFT predicts is of course the counting of the states. For every energy there is a certain counting of states with a spin multiplet, and that's predicted by the CFT. Another defining feature is the energy gap between the two sectors, which you can see here, and that is called the conformal weight. And in the case of SU2 level 1, this conformal weight is equal to 1/4. So I'm saying this just because later we will compare this to some entanglement spectrum of a projecting entanglement per state, so just so that you have that in mind. Okay, so now I want to explain to you what's the problem of projecting entanglement per state for Carroll topological phases. So it was for a long time believed that it was just not possible to write a Carroll PEPS, and eventually it was figured out that it's possible, but that all of the Carroll PEPS that can be written are gapless. And of course, Carroll topological phases, such as the one of fractional quantum Hall effect, are gapped systems. So it was notably proved in a no-go theorem by Jérôme Dubail and Nick Reed that if you have a free fermionic PEPS and it's Carroll, then the state is also critical in the sense that its correlation function decreases algebraically. And in the case of interacting PEPS, well, this no-go theorem does not apply, but up to date, all the known examples are gapless. Okay, so there is up to date no gapped example of a Carroll PEPS. Yes?
Excuse me. So what do you mean by free fermion PEPS?
Okay.
Completely obvious to me.
Well,
You did not introduce any fermion by defining PEPS.
yeah. Of course, what I call free fermion will be a PEPS that obey Wick's theorem, which means that all the correlation function can be computed from the two-point correlation function. So that's, let's say, the definition. Now there is a way to construct like fermionic PEPS from a non-interacting free fermion system called fermionic Gaussian PEPS, and typically that's what we consider here. But that to be complete. Is it okay? And so up to now we have like two main examples of interacting PEPS. One of them, which was done in my actual group in Munich, was obtained by using Gutzwiller projection of non-interacting Carroll superconductor PEPS. And another one, and the second one, which I'm going to develop a bit more, was proposed by Didier Poil-Blanc, Ignacio Cirac, and Norbert Schur, which is a PEP for a Carroll spin liquid. Okay. However, this example have an entanglement spectrum which is close to SU2 level 1, but it has like a lot of unresolved discrepancies, and so one of the things I want to present there is the explanation of these discrepancies. Okay, so let me introduce this PEPS for Carroll spin liquid. So it was introduced by Didier and everyone in this paper. So it's a PEP for square lattice, spin 1/2, and the bond dimension is equal to 3. It has SU2 symmetry, which means that the representation on the virtual of the virtual legs are given by a spin 0 and a spin 1/2. And we are considering a state which will be rotation invariant, but in which reflection will be the same, will have the same effect as complex conjugation. And this is like for quite normal, quite expected for a Carroll liquid. Imagine that you have a state that has a Carroll edge mode, and now you apply reflection. What happens is that the Carroll edge mode goes on the other direction, and that the state is complex conjugate. Okay, so we are just going to impose this constraint, which is very natural. Okay, so this PEPS is given by a sum of 3 tensors. The first one is the nearest neighbor RVB that I already introduced, and the two other parts are coming from this kind of term where you have a part similar to the nearest neighbor RVB, and then two of the virtual spin are like forming a singlet, and this typically will create longer range singlet in your state. So now, to fulfill this constraint, we are taking a linear combination of, for the real part, the mirror even term, and the imaginary part, the mirror odd term. Okay? And this by construction, these PEPs exhibit a Z2 virtual symmetry. So it's just that if you act with this matrix Z on each of the 4 legs, then it's up to minus sign invariant. And here I can give you my convention. This first column corresponds to the spin 0, and these 2 here to the spin 1 half. Okay, so that if you have any questions. And here is the entanglement spectrum. I show here the model entanglement spectrum that you want to reproduce, and here as the entanglement spectrum that they obtain. Okay, and so in somehow you can see that there are like clear differences, but still some Carroll feature. Okay, and so here you have the 2 sectors, the even and odd sector, which are defined by this eigenvalue, by the eigenvalue of this virtual symmetry somehow. And so you have these 2 sectors corresponding to the 2 possible value of this Z2 symmetry. Okay, so here is the even sector, and while the counting of the state corresponds the one of the even sector here, you can see that the state are appearing at different momenta, and notably this state that should be in the same multiplet have different momenta. Okay, so doesn't look so convincing, at least to me. And now if you look at the odd sector, once again the counting of the levels, let's say the levels, it kind of looks like this, but in fact there are 2 branches, right? So instead of having a single branches as in the odd sector here, you have 2 strictly degenerate branches. Moreover, we can wonder what the conformal weight, and here you can see that it's closer to 1, which is quite far from the 1/4. Okay, so this is like a couple of discrepancies between the entanglement spectrum and what is expected. And so this constitutes kind of the motivation of our work. And typically, this construction, like they started from very basic ingredient of what everyone would want to have for a Carroll spin liquid. They ask for invariance under SU2 translation spatial rotation. I think it's quite natural. And then spatial reflection should be the same thing as complex conjugation. And at the end, what they obtain is an entanglement spectrum which is quite different from the one of SU2 level 1. Okay, so that raises a couple of questions. One of them is like, are these discrepancies a consequence of the PEP formalism, which would imply that it's not possible to have a PEP for SU2, which an SU2 level 1 spectrum, entanglement spectrum, or is this a problem of this construction? But at the same time, this construction is pretty basic. I mean, let's say pretty normal. This is what you expect. So either it's not possible to obtain a PEPs with SU2 entanglement spectrum, so no PEPs for describing any like related to Laughlin physics, or of course, what's the proper way of doing it, right? So this is typically what I'm going to talk about today. And what we see in these discrepancies is that all of these are related to the symmetries. And also here, what imposes symmetry. So what we did first is to study the interplay of these different symmetries in the PEPs formalism. And so of course, the question is whether we can implement all this symmetry at the same time, or whether there are some constraints, and whether this symmetry also implies some virtual symmetries. Okay, so this is now the outline, now that I kind of put the picture all together. In the first part, I'm going to describe our work on the interplay of SU2 and space group symmetries in the PEPs framework. On the second part, I will describe the application of our result to this case of the Carroll spin liquid PEPs. And in the third part, I will study a specific line in the parameter space where we recover a virtual U1 symmetry. Okay, so before doing that, I have to introduce how symmetries are working in PEPs. So let's start first with physical symmetries. So imagine we have a symmetry and we have like a PEPs and we want to impose like a physical symmetry. So we act on the physical index with a representation of our group. And for the PEPs to be invariant, it's enough that it's transformed under this way. And what is important to notice is like 2 of the legs have to transform under the representation rho, like some representation, and 2 of the other legs have to transform with the conjugate representation rho star. And why is it the case? Well, of course, if you want to apply your physical symmetry on all the legs at the same time, and then you want these guys to cancel. And of course, what you know is that you will have rho times rho star. This is going to give you the identity. So that's why you want this rule of transformation of your tensor. Okay? And directly, in fact, this rule of transformation, if you apply them for SU2, this directly gives you a virtual Z2 symmetry. So let me correct, for SU2 with half integer physical spin. And this is quite clear. Let's imagine that here you have an half integer physical spin. By construction, what you need is that on the virtual degree of freedom have to be constituted of a sum of integer and half integer representation, because of course, let's imagine you just put 1/2 everywhere. Well, the fusion of all these 4 1/2 spins will give you integer spin, right? So if you want an half integer spin, you need to take a sum of integer and half integer representation. So now that you have this, what you can do is just apply this equation here by just wondering how exponential 2i pi sz act on this state. You just have to apply this operation. And what you will see is that you will get, so of course, 2 pi sz is invariant. Leave every spin invariant. Am I clear here, or should I write it on the blackboard? Yeah, just. So typically you have here you have a spin 1/2, and you act with exponential 2 pi I z on this spin 1/2. Yeah, z. I'm sorry. So typically the representation of that, right? Yeah. And so what it gives you is just, so it's a spin 1/2, so it gives you -1 times the identity. So I will just drop so typically it just gives you this, okay? Right? That's all. So now you go through, you have it act on the 4 virtual spin. And what you have on the 4 virtual spin is, here you have 0 plus 1/2. And what you can see is 0 plus 1/2, and you have this. So on the integer spin representation, that gives you 1. And then the half integer spin representation, that gives you -1. So you have a matrix action, which is just given by, you have a virtual symmetry. Here, the symmetry doesn't act on the physical spin, but here it will, and this is the matrix which implements this virtual symmetry. Okay? And this is very simple. It's 1 on the integer spin representation, and it's -1 on the half integer spin representation. Okay? So I hope this is clear now. Right? Okay, so by construction, if we want to have a PEP which has SU2 symmetry and spin 1/2, we have a virtual Z2 symmetry. That's just the message here, very clear. And now, let's say that I want to see how space group symmetry is working. For example, if I want to have rotation invariant of reflection, what I just will do is implement this symmetry at the level of the tensor, and that's what is happening. And what you can see, either for both cases, is that some representation will be mapped to conjugate representation. Okay? And so as soon as you have a group for which the representation and the conjugate representation are not the same, which is typically the case if you have not like very simple group like you want, your local tensor with internal symmetry is not point group symmetric. Okay? And I think that's kind of what was for overlooked in Didier and Ignacio and Norbert's paper, that somehow there is a non-trivial interplay of the different symmetries in the PEP framework. But now if I just say that, well, we couldn't do anything, right? And somehow it would have been realized earlier. But what's happening, like for SU2, you have another property, which is that representation are self-conjugate. So that you can map a conjugate representation to the representation using this matrix omega, which is in fact just virtual singlets. Okay? So now what you can do is just modify your tensor to incorporate this omega here and here, and now your physical tensor will transform in a symmetric way. Okay? So that's what is, and what do you pay for that? Well, what do you pay? Like you introduce this omega, and your tensor now, instead of contracting it with the identity, you contract them with this omega. Okay? So that's what you do. But in fact, the problem is not solved. It's not solved because of the following fact. Of course, the singlet for SU2 are oriented. And once again, if it was, if you had like purely integer spin on the virtual level, it would not be a problem. If you had purely like a half integer spin, it would not be a problem. It's just a sign. The fact that you have this combination of half integer and integer spin induce the fact that the singlets are oriented is a problem. So yeah, I just want to mention that these singlets are oriented, and to flip them, this is the same as introducing this matrix Z that I wrote before, and that the fact that it's oriented is conditioned to the fact that you have this virtual Z2 symmetry. So now I can write different states, which are like which look pretty the same, but they just differ by the pattern of the singlets. I can write a translation invariant state, psi1, just by taking the arrows in that direction, or I can write a rotation invariant state here, which is like this. Okay, and somehow these states are in fact inequivalent. Yes, maybe people don't see the arrows so much. So anyway, this one is translation invariant, and this one is rotation invariant. The precise singlet pattern is not so important, right? And just the fact that I want to say that these states are not the same. They are not equivalent, and it depends on the singlet patterns. Okay. And now I just want to give a very simple example, which is the case of Majumdar-Ghosh MPS, which is the same thing as nearest neighbor RVB, but in 1D. Once again, physical spin 1/2, 0 plus 1/2 on the virtual level. You have the same virtual Z2 symmetry given by the same Z matrix. It obeys this. And the PEPS, which is translation invariant, is just this linear combination. So either you project your physical spin to the left, or you project the physical spin to the right. Okay, and it's just a linear, like with a plus sign. And now these two states, well, I can just show that they are different. It's very simple. So this one will be inversion symmetric, and this one will be translation, the translation invariant one. And what you can see is that if you inverse these arrows here, like these arrows and these arrows, while you insert is this Z matrix, now you can use this virtual symmetry to remove these Z's. Okay, so in many cases you will remove the Z's, but there will be one left if your number of particles is not divisible by 4. Your number of sites is not divisible by 4. And so you have this relation between these two states. These two states are equal if the number of sites is divisible by 4. And these states are different. They differ by a flux insertion if the number of sites is not, it has to be even, but is even and not divisible by 4. Okay? So this is like what gives the Majumdar-Ghosh example, and in fact it's exactly the same for any SU2 invariant PEPS or MPS. Okay, so here...
I'm not sure I see what the two states are. So in terms of the usual dimerized configuration, can you...
Yeah, sure. So this one is the one that will be invariant part translation. So it's the plus sum.
Of the two dimerized.
And this one will be the minus one. So the momentum is not the same exactly, right? No? Maybe it's a very complex way of saying that, huh? But it just... Okay, so now this is like the summary of the result, and so typically for half integer spin we have a virtual Z2 symmetry. It's mandatory. You have but for the SU2 you have singlet orientation so that translation invariants or point group symmetry are formally broken. So you have to choose one or the other. And now these states are different by some flux insertion, like the Z2 flux insertion, if one of the two lengths is divisible by 2 but not by 4. Okay, that's the basic. I want also to mention like some, let's say like as a side remark, that if your group is not SU2 but something more complicated that does not have, and you consider like a virtual representation that are not self-conjugate, then the situation is in fact much more dramatic in the sense that those two states do not describe the same physical spin, right? So somehow I think that this trouble like can be overlooked only for SU2, because for example for SU3 you see immediately that you are not like representing the same physical spin. So it's pretty clear. Okay, so now I can apply this result to solve the entanglement spectrum issue for the Carroll PEPS. Okay, so let me remind you, I want to understand why this entanglement spectrum doesn't look like this, and I will first focus on the even sector. And so what was considered in Didier's paper is typically considering the rotation invariant state. And this is the entanglement spectrum that I found with the translation invariant state for n equal 8, and this is the one that they found. And now, if you remember, I told you that the states are the same if the number of sites is divisible by 4. So where does come the difference, right? Well, in fact, it comes from the fact that when you don't do it like very carefully, the cut that you are going to consider is going to make is going to break like translation invariance. And typically, in our case, we are using this cut, and what they did is in fact to use that cut, okay, which breaks translation invariance. But of course, when recast in this language, it's very simple, but took us time to figure out what was the problem. And so now this is the spectrum that you obtain for each site, and on the event sector, you have just a single branch with the correct assignment of spin multiplet, and momentum, okay, and the counting match SU2 level 1.
Can you say again what you mean by even and odd sectors?
Yes. So I have to come back. So you have this Z2 symmetry. I have to come back. Lot. Exactly. So the even and odd sector correspond to the eigenvalue plus or minus 1 of this thing. So you have a Z2 symmetry, and you can project the boundary condition on these two sectors just by applying 1 plus Z to the n, 1 minus Z to the n. And this corresponds to the even and odd sector. Okay?
So in a transfer matrix construction, it comes from... Yes.
It's a boundary condition, exactly. I'm fixing the topological sector by imposing this at the boundary, yes. Okay, so we are still having this problem of exactly degenerate branches on the odd sector. And there are like two branches that are exactly degenerate, which means that there is a symmetry between the two. So it took us a bit of time to find what is the symmetry. So now I can explain it very simple. The symmetry is an anti-unitary dress mirror symmetry that is exhibited by the translation invariant state. So maybe I'm not going to prove it to you, but typically it has 3 parts. So it's a mirror symmetry, so you apply a mirror operation. So this typically transform A in A star and switch the direction of all the singlets. Okay. Then you, of course, to go back from A star to A, you have to apply a complex conjugation, and all the singlets can be retransformed in the correct way by acting with this stagger operator, which is just a product of Z, right, on half of the site. Okay. So this is a demonstration, but we don't have. Maybe I'll just go a bit faster. And this operator has a very specific way of interacting with the translation, which means that it's transformed under this way, which typically means that in the even sector, this guy is equal to 1, so it doesn't change anything. But in this odd sector, this is given to this is equal to minus 1, and so you have a shift of momentum of pi in the odd sector. Okay, and this is exactly what you are seeing here. We have 2 branches, and they are shifted by pi. And so this is the operator that is responsible for this thing. Okay? And so this mirror symmetry enforces that you have 2 branches in the odd sector entanglement spectrum. And if you really want to have SU2 level 1, you need to break it in order to reproduce the entanglement spectrum. And so to do that, what we did is to consider a specific line in the parameter space, which is the line where we suppress all the contribution coming from the nearest neighbor RVB state. So we just have like state coming from the long-range singlet state, if you remember. And there's a single parameter, lambda c, which is typically like a term in front of the imaginary part. Okay. And so in this PEPS, all the terms have 3 legs that are in the virtual spin 1/2, right? And so this implies once again that you have a virtual U1 symmetry, so you can act on the PEPS with this matrix, which is the same as previously, and this is a virtual symmetry. And the only difference from the nearest neighbor RVB is just the fact that you have that the charge is not the same. Before we were exponential I-phi, here there is a factor of 3, but it doesn't make any other difference, right? And so this, now we come back to your question. So what I considered before is virtual symmetry, where here you are acting on U with U, and here you are acting with U dagger, right? So it's a different thing, but this kind of virtual symmetry can be on bipartite lattice, okay, on bipartite lattice, made into like a proper virtual symmetry. And to do that, typically you need to act with U phi on one sublattices, for example this one, and on U phi dagger on the other sublattices. And like this, you recover like a proper virtual U1 symmetry, and that's the reason why. I mean, that's, let's say, a PEPS way of understanding the different behavior between bipartite and non-bipartite lattice, for example, for the nearest neighbor RVP states. But what there is, to come back to this parameter, I mean to this one, what we have eventually is a state that also obey Gauss law, so just the charge is not the same. But besides that, it has kind of the same property. Okay, and so now what I want to do is, of course, to fix this charge once again by acting with a projector of the boundary on the boundary vector. I will project on a given charge sector. So this charge is in fact very simple to understand. It's just the number of virtual spin 1/2 on the even site minus the number of virtual spin 1/2 on the odd site. So it can take any value from half of the cylinder half of the number of sites of the cylinder minus or to plus. And what we found numerically is that the dominant sector, this charge is equal to 0 or plus or minus 1. And we also found that the states with Q equal plus or minus 1 are very close to each other. So we are just going to consider two sectors, the Q equals 0 and the Q equal 1. But this is like, let's say, kind of a numerical statement. We are just looking at what's the eigenvalue of the transfer metric, which one are the biggest one, and we are just keeping these states that are the biggest eigenvalue. Yes?
Is this charge somehow conserved when you move, or?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a symmetry of the transfer metric. Yeah, because...
So, okay. So
yeah.
Dominant is, you mean, again, vectors in those sectors that the largest.
Exactly. So to be more precise, it's conserved by the square of the transfer matrix because it's staggered. So of course the transfer matrix. I mean, now we also have to consider the square of the transfer matrix. Okay. And now since this operator is staggered, what does translation and also this dress mirror translation is to exchange Q and minus Q. And thus, as soon as you have Q different from 0, like a state which has Q different of 0 breaks typically the translation and the mirror symmetry. Okay, so now comes the result. After a bit of work. So the event sector you already seen, and now the event sector, well, as a single branch. But somehow, so now it has, so in both sectors you have a single mode with a linear dispersion relation, but somehow this entanglement spectrum looks a bit weird, right? And why is that? Well, on this, for this Q equals 0 sector, we have a full translation symmetry. Well, for Q equal 1, we break this translation symmetry. Now we have a translation only by 2 steps, and thus the Brillouin zone was, well, it's half dense, right? So somehow it looks a bit weird, but like let's say the number of states and the counting is correct. Okay, so now we can analyze this entanglement spectrum more precisely, more like quantitatively. And of course, to do that, what we did is to compute the conformal weight and the ratio of the velocities in both sectors. Okay, so that's what I show here. Let me remind you that for the CFT predict h equal to 1/4 and the velocity to be the same. Okay, so here are the results as a function of this last parameter that we have. So in violet, you have the ratio of these two velocities. Okay, so you can see that for a small value of this parameter, and it corresponds to this right axis. So for small value of this parameter, this is like below 1, quite far from 1. But then there is a huge region of parameter space where it's between 1 and 0.95. So let's say we can say it's roughly equal. And now I can look at the conformal weight, which is like this both curve, but we will focus on this green curve that was obtained by a linear fitting of each entanglement spectrum. And what you see is that there is and now this corresponds to the left axis, and that there is this region of parameter where this value is equal to 1/4. Okay, but typically, and what we were not expecting is that these steps correspond to the CFT in a very small region around this parameter lambda carol equal to 1. Of course, we understand very well that for this very close to 0 or this at infinity, it cannot work, but that it's just such a small region here. Okay. So anyway, for these parameters, we have a correct state counting, the correct conformal weight, and the equal dispersion velocity, and thus the entanglement spectrum matches the one of the CFT. Okay, so this is like our way and the way we settle the puzzle of these Carroll spin liquid PEPs. What we show is that there is a non-trivial interplay of different symmetries in the PEPS framework, notably a physical SU2 symmetry, translation invariance, and point group symmetry, for in the case you have half integer spin. So this symmetry, this interplay explain why this inconsistency in the entanglement spectrum, and once we restrict ourselves to this line in parameter space, we were able to construct like a PEPS, which has the correct conformal spectrum at the boundary. So for these parameters. So now, of course, like we just have one line where we can solve this issue, and at the same time, that this line where we have a virtual U1 symmetry where we can let's say argue that the state is critical. So we would like to see whether for other parameters there is an emergence of this virtual U1 symmetry, for example by some renormalization procedure, and we want to establish a bit on a stronger footing the link between virtual symmetry, like having continuous virtual symmetry, and criticality. That's something that is not well understood in the PEPS framework. Moreover, we would like to implement other probes and entanglement spectrum for a bigger system, because for now we are limited to these 8 sites, so which is not that big. Of course, the big question of the field is to have an analytical understanding of the relation between the tensor and the CFT that we obtain at the edge. So here it was constructed a bit ad hoc, and we found SU2 level 1, but we have no prior knowledge or no way to predict which kind of CFT we will find. And we want to generalize to other lattices, especially lattices where you don't have, like not bipartite lattices, so where we are not going to have this kind of virtual U1 symmetries, other states, and of course other virtual representation. On that, I would like to thank you all for your attention.
Is this result related to the projecting symmetry group, which allowed for the current symmetry? Lattice symmetry, how lattice symmetry is fractionalized in the current symmetry? I think there might be some kind of classification or the symmetry fractionalization.
Well, I guess there must be just that.
It's maybe compatible with those results, but in the PIPS, the spectrum is critical.
Yes.
Barclay is critical, so
Yes, state is critical.
yeah, still it's not clear.
No, yeah, I think typically like I mean, there have been lots of effort put into trying to have the same kind of classification in the PEPS framework, and for let's say good reason, like no one managed to. I mean, for reasons that are understood, typically no progress were made. Of course, like maybe at some point there will be a projective classification related to what is done to MPS, but we are far from that, I would say. And so I don't know exactly how and whether we can understand this problem in this language. But of course, it's an interesting question. Yes.
I have a general question about this bulk edge correspondence relating so physical edge spectrum with the entanglement spectrum. So the framework is more or less clear when the gap of the system, when the bulk of the system is gapped.
Mm-hmm.
Because then at low energy, excitations can only be on the edge by definition.
Mm-hmm.
But when the bulk is gapless, then what does it mean really to say that we can is it still meaningful to say this is an edge excitation, this is not? And then to me it's then more mysterious why such a correspondence between entanglement spectrum and
This is
spectrum is meaningful, that it would still work in a gapless system.
This is it's not like completely understood. What is clear here is that we are always considering like finite system, and of course on this finite system there is no problem because in fact the transfer metric is gap. But we know that is not going to be the case, and like we can, let's say, compute it. We can use like let's say IDMRG method to show that it's going to be gapless. But that's why here, like in this precise example, it's not a problem. But of course, what we are doing here is very similar to what is done in DMRG for critical state, right? It's like we are using some method that is not supposed to describe the phase, but we expect, or we would like somehow, because we have algorithm, because we have understanding, we would like to be able to approximate like this system using these states. And of course, it's not clear that it's working. So, but in the emergy, it's working. So this, so you have to see that in that respect. And once again, imagine you have an Hamiltonian. You will have a finite bond dimension, and so you will also, in fact, have a gap system.
So could you summarize once again what's wrong in the previous calculation by Didier?
Well, I'm not sure I want to say. No, I think that there is like something that was missed, and of course, like something that I haven't totally explained is like, well, usually you want to impose 3 symmetries, and you can impose only 2, but it's very easy to not see it, in the sense that you have to choose. So you have this translation invariant, space group symmetry, and SU2 symmetry, and you have to choose 2 out of the 3. Okay, and so here what you can see, in fact, in where is that? Here, the problem somehow is like, so this state should have the same SU2 quantum numbers, but you see they don't correspond to the same translation quantum number, right? So it means that they consider a version where like SU2 and so typically they choose here to keep momentum, translation invariance, but not SU2, right? Because like the spectrum breaks explicitly SU2, right? And I think this this understanding is not simple. And it's not simple for the following reason, which I can explain a bit more. Typically what we do is we compute the transfer matrix, okay? And the transfer matrix, we are like summing on the physical states. And thus what precisely symmetry we have on the physical state is something that we don't have a direct access, or we don't have a direct control. And so what they consider here, at least in the first version, is in fact that they staggered, without noticing, they staggered their physical symmetry. Okay? So what happened here is like their SU2 is in fact not translation invariant. They staggered it because when you do that, it allows to have a translation invariant PEPS. Okay? So typically, so yeah, I mean, we can discuss more, but typically that's what happened. You can act on the physical spin. This will shift, like this will reverse all the arrows. So your state is translation invariant, but of course you have this operator on the physical spin. Okay, but now you consider the transfer matrix. And all this operator goes away. Okay, so you don't see, like you don't realize that you staggered your physical spin. And I think that's typically the problem here. Okay, so this is this. This I think was very difficult to find out. So I will not say that they made any mistakes. It's just a symmetry that pops out because of the construction, and somehow it's funny to see that even when we restore like translation invariance or thing, well at the end we still had to break it to make this thing correct, right? So it seems that mandatory, like it's compulsory that you break somehow translation invariance.
So in one of your last plots, you showed that you got the correct conformal weight and ratio velocity. So should we conclude that there might be a phase transition in this state as a function of
Yes.
lambda?
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's difficult to say if it's a phase transition or, you know, you have to, let's say, be careful. But clearly, I mean, like the physics described at both lambda Carol equals 0, lambda Carol equal infinity is like very different from this one, which is typically like because you have states that don't break time reversal symmetry. So
What happens, for instance, at lambda C infinity? It's just dominated
by long range singlet, yes. Typically would be
it's still a large superposition. It's not.
yeah, it's a large superposition of typically long range singlet, but that will be positive. Because of course, I mean, I can go back to the. I mean, we haven't like established properly what's the nature. We can just argue. I mean, what's the precise nature? But we know that it's real, right? Because what happened, of course, is like imagine you put you make this guy very big, right? Then you can factorize this, and of course, these terms don't matter anymore, right? And then, of course, this is just a factor, but this is just a constant, it doesn't matter. And the only thing that you have is this thing, right? So typically it becomes real. Of course, we can, well, I mean,
It could be that you are still in the same phase until lambda 2 is strictly 0.
Yeah, well, I mean, we still think somehow that the property of the entanglement feature, spectrum, are like characteristic of the phase, and notably, if you have a Laughlin phase, you expect the conformal rate to be 1/4. Of course, like you can argue that that it's gapless and that maybe it's not quantized in this case. Thank you.